In Hangzhou, China, in May 2009, a wealthy 20-year-old named Hu Bin was drag racing with his Mitsubishi when he hit and fatally injured a pedestrian in the crosswalk. The victim came from a modest background and worked as a telecom engineer. Hu Bin was going so fast that the victim's body was hurled at least 20 yards. Hu Bin and his wealthy friends were photographed smoking cigarettes and laughing while waiting for police to arrive. Their disregard and insensitivity, depicted in the tabloid photos, provoked public outcry and spotlighted a case that mixed reckless behavior with a potential police cover-up. Though the police later admitted to underestimating Hu Bin's driving speed, they reported a meager 43 miles per hour, which is not nearly enough to fling a body 20 yards. Hu Bin was only sentenced to jail for 3 years. Drunk drivers who cause similar damages may face the death penalty or life in prison. Further dismay arose when the man who arrived in court for sentencing wasn't even Hu Bin, but a body double instead. Hiring a body double to stand in for wealthy crime suspects is not uncommon in China. In fact, the practice even has its own name, Ding Shui. Ding means substitute, and Shui means crime, which translates to substitute criminal. Though not legal, it is also not investigated by police, probably due to bribery and coercion from wealthy offenders. Though China is a communist country that, in theory, seeks equal socioeconomic status among its citizens, Ding Shui is an example of how economic inequality stains the nation and manifests in the justice system. China's wealthiest people can get away with murder, literally. In 2009, a wealthy man who caused a fatal car accident hired his employee's father to confess and serve out his sentence. In another incident, a man caught driving a motorcycle without a license hired a stand-in for $8,000. Another time, a demolition company owner who illegally demolished a home hired a poor man to serve as his body double in jail and promised $31 for each day he spent behind bars. The poorest of the poor are often willing to suffer consequences on behalf of the wealthy as a way to honor their family and escape poverty. According to the 2021 Forbes annual rich list, Beijing, the capital of China, now has the most billionaires compared to every other city in the world. Between 2020 and 2021, the city added 33 more billionaires to its population, with a running total of 100 and growing. New York City had housed the most billionaires for the past 7 years and narrowly lost with 99 billionaires compared to Beijing's 100. China added 210 billionaires total in its population last year, including Hong Kong and Macau. Nearly half of these individuals made their money in the technology sector, which grew exponentially out of the pandemic. Compared to Western countries, China could contain the spread of COVID-19 relatively quickly, with government-mandated lockdowns that forced people to go online for shopping and entertainment. As a result, tech giants infinitely increased their reach and wealth. Beijing's wealthiest man in 2021 was Zhang Yiming, the founder of TikTok and CEO of its parent company, ByteDance, with a net worth of $35.6 billion. The gap between the richest rich and the poorest poor continues to grow. While protesters in the U.S. target the wealthiest 1%, China's wealthiest 0.01% controls nearly half of the country's capital. This upper tier of China's richest citizens is mostly the children of relatives of China's past rulers and dynasties. Now, they collaborate to pool all wealth and power amongst themselves in an increasingly concentrated portion of the population. They have also been known to coerce police into shockingly short jail sentences. China is known for its limitation of free speech. Still, as this corruption continues to make headlines, lower-class citizens seem more willing to sacrifice their honor and status to decry the unfairness and inequality. For as long as Westerners have been going to China, they have reported this body double phenomenon. Various missionaries, scholars, and travelers noticed it as an oddity of the country's legal system, which has continued into the present. In 1848, the going rate for a substitute was 17 pounds, or about $2,000 in today's economy. Criminals would have to wear cane, a device used for public humiliation. It was a large square of paneled wood that had a hole in the middle for an individual's head. It was often paired with a chain around the person's neck to keep them from moving from their spot. The cane restricted people's movements to such an extent that it caused some to starve because they couldn't feed themselves. In 1895, George Mackay, a missionary to Taiwan, witnessed the body doubles and the wrongful mistreatment they went through. He said it was an open secret that these men had nothing to do with the case but were bribed to wear the Kang for 6 weeks. In 1899, a scholar of Chinese criminal law said that the courts openly allowed offenders to hire substitutes and that this practice would likely continue for the foreseeable future. He was right. The wealthy can even hire stand-ins for capital punishments. They would be promised food and wealth for their starving families in exchange for taking on another person's crime. It was viewed as highly honorable to sacrifice oneself for their family's prosperity. Sacrifice was seen as a lesser evil than poverty. Some Chinese law officials even justified the practice, arguing that the real criminal was responsible for paying a hefty fee to the substitute and thus paid the market value for his crime. In turn, the stand-in's punishment would serve as a warning for other criminals and thus keep the crime rate low. Others argued that it simply encouraged the wealthy to engage in crime. Under this pretense, they could get away with it by hiring a poor person to face the consequences. China has a long history with these body doubles. In an interview with Slate, one Chinese police officer admitted to the existence of replacement convicts, saying that while law presides over wrongdoing in America, the people preside over crime in China. Therefore, the people hold the power to dole out punishment. When the wealthiest are in charge and the offenders, justice is rarely served. This practice of stand-in suspects has long taken place for China's Mafia, when Mafia bosses would get caught and their subordinates would serve time on their behalf. The substitute convict would be compensated for their time served, with money and the knowledge that the Mafia was looking out for their family. The practice of Ding Shui even occurs among the non-wealthy, especially in vehicle accidents, when the driver escapes the scene before being identified. Therefore, anyone can stand in as the suspect. In one case in which a drunk driver hit an older man, the driver's son confessed to the crime to prevent the police from testing his father's blood alcohol levels. In another case in which the deputy director of Zhongshan Forest Bureau was involved in a hit-and-run, he sent his wife to confess to the crime to avoid risking his career. To minimize the sentence, the suspect is sometimes swapped for a more sympathetic person, perhaps a family member or friend who is younger, sober, licensed, and insured. But in the digital age, when photos of the subject are quickly snapped and circulated, more believable body doubles need to be hired, thus allowing these replacement convicts to become exclusive among China's very rich. Known for its extreme communism, China also veers towards capitalism in surprising ways. It is a newly industrialized country with a growing GDP powered by its vast exports. But as the country's wealth increases, so does its rural-urban income disparity. The National Bureau of Statistics of China reports urbanites earning 3.33 times more than their farming counterparts. In 2014, the disparity became severe when 1% of the population officially owned more than one-third of the country's wealth. It has since gotten worse, with 0.01% of the population owning more than half of the country's wealth. The inequality present in China is due to various factors, including policies biased towards urban and coastal environments, unequal access to education, and demographic changes as the older population passes away, and the effects of the one-child policy of 1979 linger. Economists warn that unless the government acts, these disparities will continue to grow and could even threaten the nation's stability. In 2012, Gu Kailai, a Chinese businesswoman, lawyer, and wife of a prominent Chinese politician, was convicted for the death of British businessman Neil Heywood. She became involved in a national scandal when her husband's deputy, Wang Lijun, sought refuge at the U.S. office in Chengdu, China. Supposedly, Wang possessed evidence of a corruption case where Gu's husband attempted to halt an investigation against her. Wang stated that this case had to do with a business dispute. British businessman Neil Heywood demanded $22 million from Gu after a failed business venture and even threatened her son. Heywood was later found unresponsive under mysterious circumstances. Wang alleged that Gu got him drunk on whiskey and tea, then poured animal poison in his mouth. She placed pills next to him to look like an overdose. Investigators opened a case into Gu. As a result, her husband lost his prominent position in the Communist Party. In 2012, Gu was officially charged with the passing of Heywood and publicly admitted wrongdoing. She received a suspended life sentence, which was commuted to life in prison after 2 years. She did not contest the charges. However, after media footage of the trial was released, intense public outcry ensued, with people alleging that the woman in the video was not Gu at all. It was a body double. This was emphasized by her political ties as the wife of a corrupt Chinese politician known for embezzlement and bribery. The Chinese government attempted to censor such content, which raised more suspicion from the UK and US. The Chinese Communist Party and facial recognition experts argued that Gu was the woman who stood trial. But the prominent practice of Ding Shui in China means that these promises are not guaranteed. This brings us back to the case of Hu Bin, the rich 20-year-old man who took someone's life while drag racing in his Mitsubishi. While someone convicted of manslaughter may face life imprisonment, Hu Bin only got 3 years in jail, if this was Hu Bin at all. Comparison photos between the court case and the crime scene show two suspects that look markedly different from one another. The photos show two men who have vastly different physical and facial features, including body weight and distance between the eyebrows. An internet survey showed that 98.5% of people believed Hu Bin hired a body double. Judicial authorities countered, arguing that Hu Bin's family only possessed moderate wealth and could not have afforded a stand-in. 2012 was the end of Hu Bin's 3-year sentence. Someone walked out of that prison a free man, but whether it was really Hu Bin, the world may never know. Click to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comments section when China will finally end its zero COVID policy and start opening their borders without quarantine, if ever.